once I was able to kind of heal that through myself, through clowning in the hospitals and the orphanages and things like that, then I was ready to start talking about bullying.
Hello, everyone. It's time for another episode of the Ramos Law Difference Makers podcast, and today is going to be a fun day. I'm your host, Dr. Jim Hoven, and I have with me a guest whose job is to not only make people smile, but to educate them and wake them up on a very serious issue. And among other things, one of his primary goals in life is to help people understand bullying. And bullying is going to come in lots of shapes and forms that we're going to talk about today. His story is compelling, and his message is clear, and it's so needed in the times that we live in, just like it was needed way back in the day. So this is what I'm going to ask of you on this episode, is that you listen not only with your mind, but listen with your heart, because all of us can learn something not only about what it's like to be bullied, but some of us might even fall into the category of being a bully and not even realize it. So without further ado, I want to welcome, recognize, and bring in Mr. Bullseye the Clown. Welcome.
Hi there, how are you?
Oh man, I'm doing so good. I'll tell you, you and I got a chance to just chat for a little bit before we started recording, and your energy is just so good, and your spirit just comes across as being one of pure love and pure helping, and I am so excited to visit with you today. And would you just start by giving us a little bit of background about yourself and your mission and your vision?
Well, a background on myself, I didn't become a clown actually until 2018. My father had passed away in 2018, and he never traveled, never went anywhere. So I knew that when he left me a little bit of money, I didn't want to just pay a bill. So I wanted to do something with it. And I remember seeing this movie years ago called Patch Adams.
Yes.
With Robin Williams.
Yes.
And I realized that Patch Adams was actually like a real person. So I Googled him and I found this website, and I found out he was doing like a clown tour to Russia. And so just on a whim, I signed up. I'd never been a clown before. I had no idea what I was even doing. And I signed up for this clown tour. And before I knew it, I was in the middle of Russia with 35 clowns. We were traveling around on a bus and going into hospitals and orphanages and drug rehab centers. And we had one rule, and that was to be happy, happy, happy for 14 straight days. So, and of course, I was still kind of going through a little bit of sadness because my dad passed away. Of course, I was going through some grief. And then, as you mentioned earlier in the show, I was bullied as a kid and even into adulthood. So I was kind of even harboring some of that anger that I had. And so I thought, oh gosh, how am I going to be happy for 14 straight days? But when you're kind of thrown into the middle of a hospital and they say, okay, smile, you kind of smile. So that kind of is how I started. And I really never anticipated being a clown after that. I thought this was going to be like a one and done kind of thing. I'm just going to go and, be funny for 14 days and then come home and, go back to my old humdrum job. But then like amazing things kept happening while we were there in clown. I saw the impact that we had on the people that we were clowning with. And it was very difficult because I don't speak Russian and they don't speak English. So it became all physicality, and it all became just being able to show your heart through your facial expressions. Yes. And things. I really couldn't even converse with anyone other than the clowns while I was there.
Yeah, energy, right? It's all energy transfer at that point. Yeah. Wow. And so when you went, was there any training behind it, or just be happy because there's no message necessarily that you're giving? It's literally your heart and your connection to these people in various situations to bring their spirits up in hopes that it helps them heal in some way. Was that kind of the mission there?
That kind of was the mission. The mission was we couldn't whine, we couldn't be up, we just kind of did. So he was nice enough. I would kind of latch onto like clowns that I knew had been on a trip before. So I would kind of walk with them. But sometimes he would say, okay, you go down to this end of the hall and go into all these rooms, and you just kind of walk in and do something.
Mm-hmm. And when did it become a thing about taking a theme, so from a general feeling thing to a definitive theme thing when you got back? What was it that made bullying, obviously I want to hear your story about that, because interestingly enough, Bullseye, when we had one of our attorneys, he was on episode 175 of our show, and the big thing that he went through was he was bullied as a child and even into adulthood. And it really opened my eyes to this. So to know that you were coming up as a follow-up, it was important that we get you on in this timing. And so share a little bit about how that evolved for you, where that becomes your message.
Well, how that came about, I never really wanted to talk about it. I didn't really want to be like a poster child for bullying or anything like that. But when I went to Russia and we were there for 14 days and we were happy, and then I came home, I realized that all the anger that I had toward anybody who bullied me, like my stepdad and kids in school and all of that stuff, and the grief that I was going through from my dad passing away, all of that was gone. So I really correlated the being happy and doing nice things for other people to kind of healing, being like a healing source. So once I was able to kind of heal that through myself, through clowning in the hospitals and the orphanages and things like that, then I was ready to start talking about bullying. So I sat down and I wrote like a little book on bullying called Bullseye on Bullying, where I just started recounting my story and kind of giving some hints of things that I did growing up and even into adulthood that I tried to do on my own to navigate the bullies, because back when I was a kid, it was, just learn to get along with each other. That'll,
and what about this one? Just stand up to him and you punch him in the eye. Take the biggest person and punch him in the eye. I know from one of your concepts is that's not necessarily going to work all the time.
Right. Or one that they always say, every book on bullying says, tell somebody you're being bullied. Well, that's great, but you don't know what that person's doing with the information. If you tell like a teacher, it might stop right there. The teacher may not take that to the principal or may not take that where it needs to go. And then if they do take it to the other child, then the other child's going to be very, very upset. And the bullying is going to get worse. So telling somebody is not always the best option either, that I have found in my experience.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't tell anybody. I just figured out how to do it on my own.
Mm-hmm.
That's probably why, even as a kid, probably I was considered the class clown. So that probably is why I kind of put that this wall up or this humor up in order to kind of to navigate my way around them.
Yes. And was part of the ability for you to share your story and come out with it that you were bullied as a child, and even a little bit later, whether it was at home, which is so horrible, your family is your sacred place, and you would hope that they would be there to support you. So when you feel that, that's just heartbreaking. But was one of the things that allowed you to do that was to have a sense of a different persona on with the personality, the makeup, the clothes. Did that open up the availability for you anymore to be able to come forward with this really important information?
Now that you mentioned, I guess I never put the two together, but now that you mentioned that probably is a way that makes it easier. And it's really interesting. When I was in the course of writing the book, somebody who bullied me as a kid sent me a Facebook message. I guess he was going through a 12-step program and he wanted to make amends, or I guess that's something that's one of the 12 steps. Yes. Or something.
Yep.
And so I actually put that letter in the book. Of course, I changed his name and everything.
Yeah.
So I don't get sued. So yeah, and so I was able to carry on just like a little bit of a dialogue. He didn't really want to talk too much. He just wanted to kind of get it out. And so I was able to ask a few questions and get some responses. So the questions and the responses are in the book. Just because I thought, it's kind of interesting to see it from his point of view, mm-hmm. and see why he was doing what he was doing.
Yes. Did it help you? Did getting that message, was it cathartic? Was it therapeutic? Did it kind of piss you off? Like, why'd you realize this now? What was your response to that?
Yeah, no, I wasn't really upset about it, I guess, because by the time I got back from the first clown tour, I was kind of reconciled with everything. So I was okay with it. I'm not okay with it, but it did no longer had that effect that it used to have. And be quite honest, when this guy wrote me the letter, I didn't even realize really he was one of the bullies. I just knew he kind of traveled in that group of kids, but there was a couple other ones that I really, I thought were the worst. So I was kind of like, oh, I guess he was in that group, so it didn't even dawn on me at the first that he was one of the main ones. And it just kind of, it kind of, I don't know what the word is that I'm looking for, but it was nice to hear, that he was sorry. But then I kind of talked about his life. I saw, his whole life kind of went off into a whole different direction as well. I mean, he knows that he's not a person who can work with others. So he's kind of a loner. He's been married and divorced. And so I just see that, that bullying part has really taken his life. And of course, he's in a 12-step program. So apparently he's, abused alcohol
Looking for
or
help.
something.
Yep.
So I see that, his life wasn't a wonderful life. So, I mean, I guess in some sick way, I was kind of like, okay, well, that's good to know that, you're not like this super successful.
You kind of paid your price too for the price you put on.
It was kind of like a little bit of a, karma kind of moment where you're kind of like, okay, well, that kind of comes back to bite you at some point,
It really does. And when you were creating your book, as you were writing it and going through it, did you come up with any insights that maybe the writing out, the letting it out in pen on paper, that helped you see even ways that you were experiencing bullying, and specific techniques that you can now share through the book? And again, the book is called Bullseye on Bullying. Check it out. He has it. There it is.
Okay, what kind of an author would I be to not have a copy of it, right?
Snap, too, man. You were right on that. So give us kind of the journey of you putting these thoughts on paper.
Well, as I started to write it, and some of these things I didn't even want to put some of these things in the book. It's a very small book, and it was meant to be a small book. I didn't want it to be like this big volume. I really wanted it to be kind of like a pocket manual where you could just like, okay, I'm being cyberbullied. I can flip right to a chapter on cyberbullying and what should I do here? What should I say to the bully on the line? But as I was going through this, I was kind of, I just made some of this stuff up whenever I was a kid, some of the stuff that I did to get away from the bullies. And I thought, well, should I put that in there? But I'm like, what? But it worked. So yeah, that's kind of how a lot of this stuff came about. It was trial and error. This particular thing that I did worked. Okay, this one didn't get rid of the bully. So
yeah.
What do I need to do?
Can you give an example? Maybe give an example of one that someone could, if they're watching.
Like something that I wasn't planning to put in the book because it just seemed really stupid. but it was, I would cause a scene like at school. So the bully would come up to bully me and I would scream fire, or I'd fall on the floor and roll around and just cause all kinds of disturbance. And it would freak the bully out to the point where the bully was like, you know what, leave that kid alone. He's nuts. The teacher would come out and be like, what are you doing down on the floor? Oh, nothing. So it wasn't, I didn't call the bully out per se, but, I was creating enough of a disturbance that one, it was able to get me away from the bully. I was able for the bully to back off, even though, because I was causing such a ruckus, and he didn't want to get in trouble as well. So that was like one like little thing, I tend to distract the bullies a lot. This was something that I would even do at home when my stepdad would, get on to his, drunken, binges, he would come running down the hall to, smack me with the belt or whatever it was. And so I would quickly lock my bedroom door. I would open up the bedroom window. I would hide under the bed. He would break into the room, see that the window was open, think that I climbed outside. So he would go outside looking for, so it was just a way to distract them enough until either their anger subsided or they came to their senses or he sobered up or whatever it happened to be. I just learned to kind of navigate by, causing disturbances or distractions.
And so and those were without any kind of help or, professional guidance, therapy, whatever you want to call it. These were you in survival mechanisms is what I hear. This is, you really trying to just think on your feet as a young man in the moment. Did you end up learning techniques from professionals? Did you have to go to therapy or anything that eventually led to some of this, or has it always been you just learning and organically growing on your own?
Honestly, it's always been me. I prior to writing the book, some of the people some people never ever knew that I was being bullied because I never told anybody. So I never went to a therapist. And so that was another dilemma that I had when I was writing the book. I'm like, oh, who am I to write the book and talk about bullying, because I'm not a therapist and I'm not a, psychologist. And then it just kind of dawned on me one day. I said, well, who would you go to if you were being bullied? Would you go to a psychologist who has never been bullied, or would you go to somebody who has been bullied and has survived and hasn't killed anybody in the process, and it hasn't beat anybody up? So it was like, I mean, I feel that I'm qualified to talk about it because I went through it.
Yes. And what now steps do you give? And I want to break this up between, we'll call it child and adolescent bullying, and then adult bullying, because I think that probably people think that you quote unquote grow out of bullying. But as I've been more understanding and looking, especially now with the internet and this business of people, hating each other on these social media platforms, it makes me nuts. And so how do you go about giving advice? Because I'm sure after someone picks up your book, they reach out to you and ask for help. And maybe you just say, look, this is where my expertise, I'm giving you my experience. Now you need to go talk to someone. I'm not, I don't know your game plan on it, but would you just kind of share that with us between the young side and then the adult side?
And ironically, whenever I started to write this book, I really never anticipated talking to kids about it, to be quite honest with you. I know it sounds weird, but my first main thought was, there are millions of people out there who were bullied as kids and they never got over it. So here they are, an adult, and they've never reconciled those feelings. They've never got over it. And I was fascinated by the fact that there are some adults like Lady Gaga, Susan Boyle, people like that who became super, super rich and famous despite their bullies. And then there are millions of bullies out there who now, as adults, they've taken jobs that they're way, way overqualified for because they don't feel like they're good enough to go for those jobs because the bullies have made them feel so little of themselves. So originally it was adults that I was really kind of aiming at. But then it just kind of, because I guess probably the clown, the clown thing, it kind of transformed into the children. But I would have to say, like, the one main thing that I tell everyone, and I just heard this randomly one day on a TV evangelist program. And she was saying, when we're born with power and we're born with authority. And then she was kind of talking about the devil, but I was kind of taking this to mean the bully as well. So, and she says, we all have authority and we all have power, but the bully cannot take your authority away from you unless you give the authority to them to take that away. And so once she told me that, of course, I was an adult at this point. I was like, I wish I would have heard this as I was a kid. It really made sense to me because I was like, wow, by not saying anything, I was kind of condoning their behavior. I was not standing up to them in any way, and I was not saying anything to them in any way, like, like your bullying has no power over me and all that kind of stuff. I was not doing any kind of things like that. And so I realized that part of the problem was I was kind of perpetuating some of it in the fact that I wasn't really standing up to them. I was getting away and I was figuring out a way to get away. But I wasn't doing anything to kind of stop it. So, and take my authority back. So that's what I realized that I should have been doing a lot sooner than I did.
And so how do you now express that concept to young people and to adults in your live presentations? Obviously, you go to places, they can bring you in and you can talk about a whole host of things, but staying specific to this right now, what's your message in order for them? So you tell your story, and then what advice do you give them so that someone watching or listening here, it would be like they have a mini personal audience with you right now?
Well, one of the things we do is we role play. So, I mean, I'll have like them come up, and the big thing I always think of is making sure that they're putting themselves sometimes I like to put the bullied kid in the bully's place and have them be the bully. And then if I can, I really would love to find, like, sometimes I like to find somebody, I say, who's your troubled kid and who's the one who causes a lot of trouble. And then I'll bring them up and I will actually put them in the bullied category where they're being bullied by the other kid. And so it kind of is like a role reversal for them. So I kind of do like a little play out like there. So I do kind of like a little like psychodrama kind of stuff in my presentations. But even though by you telling a bully, you have no power over me, you don't have the right to bully me. I don't have to listen to this. Although that may not make the bullying stop, it's going to give the bully a moment to kind of stop and think, hey, this kid is speaking up. And that was something that I never did. And I think that's something that a lot of kids never do is a lot of times we so I go through a lot of role playing and the fact that I have them practice those phrases, you have no power over me. You have no authority over me. I don't have to listen to this, blah, blah, blah. I kind of go through all of that with each particular person that comes up. Like I said, we do a lot of the role play. And, we even do some role play in the fact of, I think part of what attracts bully to us is what they first see from us. So I think that it's our body image and how we're holding our body. So, a lot of times if they see somebody who's got a book in front of them and their head is always down and they're not focused on, anything around them, those are the people that they target. They'll punch you in the back of the head. They'll trip you because they know that you don't see it coming.
And once it starts, then it continues on in the case of these kids.
And so I have actually a chapter on that called Your Body Speaks. And your body says a lot about you just by the way you position it. And so, the kids think it's fun, they think it's funny because I'll say, how would Arnold Schwarzenegger stand? And then they stand up and then, and I said, no, walk and talk like that. And they feel stupid, they laugh, but then they get it. I'm like, if you're walking down the hall and you're alert and you're looking around and you're seeing what's happening around you and you got your shoulders back and your chest out and you're walking in kind of an authority stance, that's going to deter some bullies from trying to attack you. At least you're going to see it coming. You know what I mean? And if you can see it starting to come, you can get out of there.
Yeah.
So I think that's another thing that I talk about. And that's another thing that I play on is, how we are presenting ourselves, to the world is how the bully also sees us. So, and of course, you always get your detractors who are going to say, well, you're telling kids to be something that they're not. No, I'm just kind of giving them another opportunity of, expressing themselves,
Yeah.
It's no different than, you're getting ready to go to battle and you get your shield and you get your armor and you get your sword and all that it's the same thing. It's like, okay, you're going to battle with this bully. You need to stand up and you need to be ready to battle them, and the only way you can battle them is to see them coming. So you got to make sure that your head is out of the book and you're not on your cell phone and you're looking on your cell phone and you're distracted by everything.
Yeah.
Being aware is really the number one key. That's if we all see it coming, it's going to be a little bit of a different
maybe we can all help each other too. If we're all kind of
Absolutely.
looking around, we can hopefully step in sometimes. If we're not the bullier or the bullyee, I think it's important message that we need to look to take care of each other. If we wouldn't want to be bullied, if we see someone being bullied, then we need to step in at whatever level that means. Obviously, it's going to be different if you're a kid interacting with another kid versus going to an adult or something like that. On the other side, in the adult side, that there's a different dynamic there. And I'd like to explore that a little bit, Bullseye, with the adults. Can you give me some examples of types of bullying that we might not think of as being bullying? And that then is going to lead us down a little bit different path here.
Well, one of the things, you always have the dynamic of a supervisor and, somebody who the supervisor is supervising. So a lot of times people don't think that, whatever the supervisor says is what you have to do, whether it's logical or whether it's not, and whether it's legal or not. So a lot of times, we feel that we have to do whatever they say or we're going to be fired. So that's kind of an abuse of authority sometimes. That's one of those things that step in. And then you get one of the things that a lot of people don't really think is bullying is you go to lunch and a whole group of friends, like, whether you're the brown noser at work or whatever it happens to be, and then they all decide that they are going to, she's not sitting at our table. We're not going to, that's actually bullying too. That's just a nonverbal way of bullying people, is to exclude them from different things on purpose, knowing that it's going to hurt their feelings.
Another way I could see that, this just popped into my head, and I've seen this happen before, and sometimes it seems like it's in jest, and I think bullies sometimes do it subconsciously, and maybe, you know, if they've quote unquote grown out of being a certain type of bully, or they were bullied, maybe people who were bullied turn into bullies, just like abused people tend to become abusers if they're not careful, potentially anyway. And it makes me like one thing I've seen before is at a table of people that are out together at, let's call it a restaurant, all of a sudden one person who, in this case, maybe it's the bully, maybe it's the loud person, the one with influence at the table, goes, oh, it's Bullseye's turn to buy today, and we didn't agree on it before. And now all of a sudden you have the entire bill for everybody, and you don't want to say something like, no, it's not actually my turn. I'll buy my part, but I'm not buying everybody's part. And that to me is an example of maybe some really passive aggressive type of bullying where it's fun, it's in the moment. Oh, you know, you'll get it this time. Am I onto something there?
Yeah, no, that actually is a lot of passive aggressive behavior is bullying. You know, I kind of identify bullying as anything that also is a recurring thing. Something bullying tends to be repetitive. It happens over and over and over again. You know, that's one of the things I talk about in the book is that, you know, kids will say, well, my parents, they make me clean up my room. And I said, well, there's a difference between discipline and there's a difference between bullying. You know, it's also intent. So it has to be repetitive. It has to be, the intent has to be to hurt you or to make you belittled or to make you feel bad. That's the intent part. So it's got to be repetitive, and it's got to be with a kind of an ill intent for bullying to really take place. You know, and then there are like those one-offs. You know, there might be a situation where, you know, kind of like you were just mentioning right there with, you know, now if that happens all the time, you know, and then you're going to like lunch with people and that person's always trying to get you to pay and put you on the spot, and or even, you know, there are people, I've actually gone to dinner with people who always try, you know, say what a wonderful job they have, and you're a clown, you know, that kind of thing. I mean, so, you know, and so after a while, you know, I kind of got, you know, if you bring it up to their attention, hey, I don't like that, you know, I don't like you saying that every time that we're out to dinner, that you call me out personally, you know, and here I am in this group of people that I may or may not know. It's really, and you embarrass me in front of them. If that becomes a repetitive thing, then that's a way of bullying somebody. It's a way of putting them down every single time, that in order to boost your own ego, saying that, you know, your job is better than their job, or that your position is better than their position, or you have more money than they have. And those are the kinds of games that adults play.
Yes.
You know,
how do we navigate that? Give us some advice on how to navigate those types of unfortunate games.
Well, those are the ones where you stand up for yourself. Those are, you know, those were the moments, just like you said earlier, where you say, no, it's not my time to pay. I'll pay for myself, blah, 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 blah. You know, and kind of make it clear that, you know, I'm not going to be bullied into a situation that's not of my own making, you know.
And what about inside the corporate walls, Bullseye? Do you think that the direct approach is start with the person themselves, or is it to, especially if it's a person that is not quote unquote on the same level, if it's someone in a management position or superior over them, do they then go to someone around that person, or do you always recommend trying to go first with the person themselves, make them aware, and then move on up the chain if that doesn't work?
I always say the only way to fix a problem is to go directly to the source of the problem. So my recommendation, I know sometimes it's not very pleasant, but if you can, go directly to the person who you're having the issue with, and make it known. So you're going to stand up for yourself and say, hey, you know, this behavior, I do not like this behavior, and this behavior needs to stop. And then if the behavior continues, one, you need to document that some way, whether it's you write down this day it happened. And, you know, as I tell kids now, you know, one thing you all have that we didn't have whenever I was a kid, you guys have a body cam with you every single day. We all have a cell phone. Things can be recorded on your cell phone every single day. So you have ways to get proof. Now, of course, you know, don't try to get the proof unless, you know, it's safe for you to get the proof. But document everything, and then take that to somebody who can do something about it. So like in the case of the corporate world, then yes, you take it to their higher up and say, hey, this is happening on this date, and this date. I approached them on this date about this. And I think one thing that a lot of corporate companies do not have is what I call a bully-proof blueprint. It's like a, there really needs to be like a little blueprint, like you would see like for a building, okay, so here you are on your little blueprint. Okay, so if you have an issue with so-and-so, who do you go to if you're being bullied? You go to this person. Well, then what is this person's responsibility here? This person needs to either go to this person, or if they're above that person over here, almost like a little blueprint,
Yeah, like an org chart kind of.
Yeah, like a little hierarchy kind of thing. I think that every organization and every company, every school should have something like that. So, if a child goes to a teacher, who does the teacher go to? Because then that way you can say, okay, where did we break this chain? So you're still getting bullied. Nothing stopped. Who did you tell? I told this person. Well, this person was supposed to tell this person, but this person didn't tell this person. And I think that I would love to see like every company like implement a plan and actually have it drawn out almost like a kind of like a family tree, of who you're supposed to go to when.
Yeah. And, I think that brings to my mind the concept of personal accountability and corporate accountability, or in other words, organizational accountability and responsibility. Because I know that one of the reasons that people don't speak up, and I've gone through this myself, where I knew something either didn't feel right for me or that I felt like it was not fair to someone else. And I thought, well, what business is it of mine? Or do I really want to confront this right now? Do I really want to deal with it? And so at some point, I think every one of us needs to look at our personal accountability strategy and say, no one is going to take care of me like me if I don't choose to take care of me. And I think, I don't know if you have some recommendations for ways to build that, what I call the confront muscle, our confrontation muscles. We're not designed to do it necessarily. We're designed to be polite to each other and take care of each other. But when one person abuses that, whether it's adult, kid, business or not, and the other, and the abusee won't do their part, then there's a falling out there. On the other side, I think that all business and organizations need to understand what this picture looks like. What does bullying look like? And then have steps in place, like you were talking about, whether it's this kind of bully-proof blueprint, or whether it's an HR system that says, hey, this is our core value about this, and if you break it, this is what you're going to experience. You know what I mean? So I think that accountability is important.
Yeah, and they need to stick to that. See, I worked for a corporate company. I won't say the name, but it's it's a big company. But I worked for a company, and the bullying there was horrible. But they would say, "Oh, come to us with any problem." Well, you would come to them with a problem, and it was their friend that bullied you, so that's where it stops. You go to HR, and their policy was, we don't tolerate this. Bring it to our attention, and we'll fix the problem. And then it stops right there at HR. It doesn't go any further because they don't follow their own policy. So if you're going to put a bullying policy and program, put it in place to make sure you follow it. Because a lot of people are not following their own policies.
Right. And Bullseye, let me ask you something that you may have never been asked before, and it never hit my brain until right now. Have you seen incidences where people who are bullied get so sensitive to being bullied that, like any nerve? So in my training as a chiropractor, I know that when a body system continually gets stressed over and over and over, it becomes hypersensitive. So then less stimulus leads to more pain, right? And if I put that into the emotional context, if someone's bullied a lot, pretty soon things that are not intended to be bullying could be interpreted by the person as being bullied when it wasn't that intention at all. So I'm trying to get to the bottom of, is everything based on my interpretation of it as whether I'm being bullied or not? Or could it be that I haven't taken the accountability for myself to say, wait, I got to discern what is being given constructively to help me grow, and that I just need to toughen up versus when I'm being bullied. Am I on to anything there?
Honestly, yeah, I think so. And now that you mentioned, I probably, whenever I was younger, was kind of like that. I kind of just thought the whole world was against me. I get bullied at home, I get bullied at school, I get bullied at work. This person doesn't like me. And I think that I read especially in college, I think that I read into things too much. And thought that I was being bullied, probably in some certain instances where probably I wasn't. It was just that one, I wasn't taking, like you said, I wasn't taking accountability, and I wasn't standing up for myself. And I was just letting, people say things to me, but I was not doing anything to stand up for myself. Uh, you know, and, a lot of us stay silent. I mean, so, somebody's yelling at you, what do you do? I mean, most of the times I never argued back. Now I do. You can't shut me up now. But back then it was like I would go into silent mode, and I'm sure people like that when
Yes.
When somebody's on to them or yelling at them or fighting with them. Now sometimes that becomes a good thing, because that was one way I learned to navigate my mom. I mean, my mom's not a bully or anything, but nothing makes her more mad is when she's trying to argue with you and you just go silent and don't argue back with her. So, but bullies are the same way. The whole point is they want to get some emotion out of you. And so when they can't get that emotion that they're wanting out of you, which is either the fear, or they want you to cry, or they want you to be upset. And when they're not getting that, it frustrates them. And after a while, you frustrate them enough, and they're going to leave you alone, because it's no longer fun for them, But no, I think I in some instances, I probably took a lot of things wrong, just because everybody was bullying me. So I just assumed everything was, until I sat back and started kind of really peeling back the onion, so to speak, on, what really is bullying. And I was kind of like, oh, I probably should go to so-and-so and say, you didn't bully me back then. I was just being, overly sensitive, because I probably was overly sensitive. And I think that a lot of bullied people are.
Yeah. Well, it would make sense. I mean, it would really make sense. And I think that's something for people to pay attention to, of just trying to be honest with yourself. Just like you want to stand up for yourself, you also want to be honest with yourself, so that you don't magnify your own pain. Because there's nothing like in the physical body of magnifying your own pain. If you have a sprained ankle and you keep jumping, that's just not smart. You know what I mean? Like, that's magnifying your pain because of your own doing. And so to I think have that self-awareness is a critical point. So I'm really glad you brought that up. And I want to follow that one up with, what if someone's an unknowing bully? Do you have any questions that we could ask ourselves that we would say, if you, in this situation, do you do this, or does this happen, or does this, where if you answer yes to these three, there's a chance where you might be unintentionally bullying someone?
Yeah, actually, I think I even have if I'm not mistaken, I think I actually have a thing in my book called "Are You a Bully?" I thought I did.
Yeah, I did see something about that in the as I was looking at the website.
Yeah. So one of the things like that I will always ask people is, do you hurt people on purpose? And that could be something as simple as, as I mentioned, like we were at dinner, and somebody might say, oh, I'm a lawyer, you're a clown, I make a lot, are you doing that just as a joke or as something fun? Or are you really doing that to try to hurt my feelings, or do you send like mean, disrespectful, or threatening messages to people, to get your point across? Whether that's on social media, whether that's on, through email, you call people names. That's the big one, calling people names. And that's one thing I always try to tell people is, no matter what names a bully calls you, don't call them names back, because then you become a bully yourself. You're trying to bully the bully.
Yeah.
And so I try to get them to kind of to chill out and to, if nothing else, walk away from somebody who's calling you names. I know that the temptation, we all have it, is to call them a name back. Something else that people may not consider bullying, which I do, so I always ask somebody who, if they think they might be a bully is, do you spread rumors about people, things that aren't true, and you're spreading them, whether that's be online, because talking about somebody behind their back and spreading something that is not true is bullying them. Because you're doing that in a harmful way, and you keep repetitively doing that over and over again. So those are some of the questions that I ask. Do you laugh at other people's misfortune? Do you make fun of handicapped people? Things like that. I mean, they may sound like very simple questions, but it kind of gives you a look into their psyche. Okay, what are you finding amusement from? And if you're finding the amusement from making somebody else feel belittled, then you're probably a bully. So we need to address that. We need to look at that. I mean, the good thing is, I mean, you don't have to stay that way. I mean, that's easy to change.
Yeah.
Um,
What kind of stories have you gotten, Bullseye, from people after having shared your message with them? Have you gotten some feedback from either A, those who've been bullied, or B, people who realized after being in the role play situation, reversal, anything like that, where they're like, man, you really helped me see another side? And I don't know how much kids would relate to that, but what kind of feedback have you gotten from your programs?
I actually have, believe it or not, I've done some for senior living communities. Because
Wow.
believe it or not, bullying happens in senior living communities. You have the people who've been there for a long time, so they are the creme de la creme because they've been there for a long time, and so they try to they try to bully. So whenever I did a program for one of them came up and goes, after your program, I realized I was bullying people. I was always saying things about them, and then I would spread things about them that weren't true just because I wanted them, not to like them more than they like me, and stop hanging out with them at their table because they'd always sat at my table. So it's really interesting when I have people come up who don't realize that the behavior that they're exhibiting is bullying behavior.
Mm-hmm.
I almost find it just as enjoyable, for people to come up to me and realize that they've been bullies in their life.
Yes.
And just as much as those people who are like, wow, what you said really. And then on the flip side, at another senior living community, there was a woman who was bullied because she wasn't vaccinated. This was during the whole vaccine thing,
Mm-hmm.
And so she was bullied and bullied and bullied about, she wasn't vaccinated. She shouldn't be sitting with us, and she should be having a mask on, and she should, because she, so she got frustrated and she left the community that she was living in. And believe it or not, I was actually working in that community. So I gave her my book on the day that she was moving out. A month later, she moved back into that same community. She says, I'm not going to let these people make me walk away from my friends. And I'm going to stand up to them. And so my book was actually able to bring her back to her home. She decided that, she'd had enough, and that she wasn't going to move and get a whole new set of friends just because people didn't like the fact that she wasn't vaccinated. So she decided to come back.
Oh, Bullseye, that's a great story to kind of pinnacle us off here. I wanted, if you would you tell our audience how they could learn more about you, or grab your book, or get a hold of you for a presentation, or just hear your story at a little bit more depth?
Yeah, you can find me at bullseyetheclown.com. I'm also on Facebook. You can find me on Facebook at Bullseye the Clown on bullying. I think that's I know it's a really long phrase, but well, Bullseye the Clown actually was taken by somebody else at one point. So, but you can find me on Facebook, Instagram. I'm on Instagram at Bullseye Clown. So you can definitely find me in all of those places. Or if you just want to email me, you can email me at bullseyetheclown.com, and I'll answer all emails.
That's great. Now, here's one more question. One more question for you.
I always feel like these are quizzes I forgot to study for.
Well, the good news is you've been studying for this one your whole life, so you're going to be good. If there's been one piece of advice that you've learned along the way in your life, or that someone has given you, that has become fundamental and basically foundational in who you are as a person and how you navigate life, what is that piece of advice, and would you be willing to share it with us?
I do have a piece of advice, but it's probably not piece of advice you might be looking for. But for me, it is the only way to be happy is to do nice things for other people. So that is how that's how I got over bullying. That's how I got over grief. I got over grief by doing nice things for other people instead of staying so wrapped up into my own grief or my own pity or my own sorrow. I just stopped doing that, and I started going out and doing nice things for other people, because there are people out there who are hurting a lot worse than I am. So my whole thing is, and in the process, it sounds selfish, but in the process of doing nice things for other people, it does nice things for you as well. So it does nice things in your heart and your own psyche by doing wonderful things for other people.
Bullseye, that was exactly what I needed. And that reminds me of that Buddhist truth about the way to stop your own suffering is to help when someone else stop theirs. And so for you to put that in such a beautifully simple and elegant way is, that fills me up so that now I can go do nice things for others so that I can feel good. So I want to thank you so much for spending so much of your time with me today, and I wish you absolutely all the best as you continue to bring this important message out to the communities all across the globe with the advent of the internet and digital books and all that. But I wish you much success, and please know that you always have a friend here at Ramos Law.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Yes, Bullseye. Have a great day.
You too.
All right, take care.